Good afternoon and welcome to our Saturday Sports Special. It is our weekend edition of Talk Sports, and I thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I hope that you're having a very wonderful weekend. Well, earlier this week, I received an email regarding a fundraising initiative to assist former West Indies pacer Patrick Patterson of Jamaica. Initially, I was a bit hesitant and attempted rather to get some clarity from the sender of this email. However, I recall in an interview on this program some time ago that the Australian cricket writer and author Ashley Gray, in which he discloses encounters with some former West Indies players and their conditions. So I decided this time to go at the source of this initiative to find out why he is seeking assistance for Patrick Patterson. What has or hasn't changed since its article 4 years ago? And I have invited the author of that article and the one who's really steamrolling that initiative. He is Bharat Sundaresan, and he joins me live from Adelaide in Australia. Yes, I think Adelaide in Australia. He is joining me to talk about this whole initiative and what he has been encountering over the past 3 years with these legends, especially West Indies legends. As I greet you, Bharat.
Hey, Michael. Yeah, it is quite late here in the night in Adelaide. You can see the dishwashers running. I hope the dog is on to sleep. I just came back from a long walk, and so if you know how they are, she's still a puppy, so if she doesn't get completely worn out, she will keep me up. So yeah, with that hope, I'm joining you, and thank you for having me on. It's honestly something that I wish I wasn't in a position to talk about, but unfortunately here we are, and I'm waiting and ready to tell you all about it.
Right, because I must say, first of all, thank you for accepting the invitation without hesitation. It's certainly an important and urgent issue, I believe, not just for you, but for others who have been reading and hearing all about it. So first of all, let me ask you, how did you find this lost legend? How did you find him?
It's a long story. I mean, it's a story that kind of runs over 3 trips I made to the Caribbean. This is back when I was still living in India. I was following the Indian cricket team back then. I used to write for a newspaper called the Indian Express. And the first time I visited the Caribbean was 2011. And, it really started out as a journalistic venture. Yeah, look, you want to interview former players, and Patrick Patterson is someone who had made an impact, left an impression on pretty much anyone who saw him anywhere in the world. And I was no different. Though I was really young when he did play, I do remember him like his last few matches. And, I grew up in a cricket mad family. So my brother and my father were big fans of just cricket and cricketers, and Patrick Patterson was one of them. So when I went there in 2011, I tried to find out about him, but everyone I asked said that no, him lost in the bush, as they say in Jamaica, when you can't find someone. And it intrigued me because, they say similar things about a lot of former cricketers. I heard you in the intro talk about Ashley Gray and his wonderful book on those who went on that rebel tour. And, one of them, Richard Austin, I remember on that tour covering matches at the Sabina Park in Kingston, and he would be running around with the stick saying a lot of things. I remember him running up to this colleague and another Indian journalist, and him saying, oh, I bless you. And he said something about Bishan Singh Beri, and it made no sense. But the thing was, at least there was fact, evidence that he was still alive. Richard Austin was still alive, and he was there. I mean, yes, he had He wasn't in, of course, a great condition, but he was there. But there was no proof about Patrick Patterson. They just said, no, he's this, he's that, he's in an asylum, things to that nature. And anyway, that tour went by. 2 years later, I was back in the Caribbean, this time with my wife, again on a cricket tour. And this time I got slightly closer, or so I thought, to finding him, because I drove through countryside Jamaica and went to his hometown where he originally comes from. And I found his parents. And, I thought, if someone goes missing from society, really, you would assume they'd go back home. They'd go back to where they came from. So once I found their parents, and that happened by chance, I was driving all around the countryside, stopping at every beer shop possible and asking them if they knew anything about Patrick Patterson. And it just so happened that I reached a little town where I bumped into a guy who had also walked into the shop, and he took me to this house where I met his parents. And once his parents told me that they did not know where he was either, is when I was, not just the journalist in me, but just the human in me was really intrigued. I was like, now it's like almost a life mission. I need to find him. And then, as it happened, like 2017, the last time I went to the West Indies, or came to the Caribbean, I landed in Jamaica, and all I wanted to do again was, even though I was there covering an Indian tour, all I wanted to do was find Patrick Patterson. And then just an incredible chain of events. I still don't know how it happened. I met such interesting characters on the way, and I wrote all of that in that piece for the Indian Express back in 2017. But to just cut the long story short, I just picked a place in the hills, somewhere just to stay for those 10 days. The owner of the place knew nothing about cricket or Patrick Patterson, but he said he'll get me help through the RIA, as he said, the Rasta Intelligence Agency, which does not exist, of course, Michael, but so I thought. And then, through him, I met a famous calypso musician, I think, called Fred Locks, or a reggae musician called Fred Locks, who I'd never heard of before, but he apparently was a big deal in the 80s and 90s. And I finally got to Patrick Patterson through, that whole next, and then he put me through to someone else, and then him to someone else. It was almost like a movie script. And yeah, I mean, I got a contact, and I contacted him, and the rest, I guess, has become folklore since I wrote that piece, and I have spoken about that story and meeting him in a lot of places, a lot of podcasts and other shows since. But yeah, it was just an amazing experience. As a journalist, all of us want have that one El Dorado story, right, where you seek to find someone who everybody else has tried, or maybe they haven't, maybe people have never tried finding, and you find. But this is someone you're talking about who, it's not just that no journalist found him, it's like nobody found him. His parents did not know where he was for 25 years. So that's really how it started, Michael, our friendship, our relationship, really. I met him a few times, and only to realize that he did not remember anything about what he did. He remembers like vague things, but the only things he really remembered back then were all the negatives, how people treated him badly, and how you could sense paranoia. He was very scared of just being around. He was scared for anyone who met him. He was scared for my well-being. As I wrote in that piece, he was very scared that someone will get to me for some reason. So just this extreme paranoia and is what he had lived with for close to 2 decades, if not more, hidden away in a small house in Jamaica. And it's funny. It almost like he exists on the periphery of what we consider our reality. He doesn't still. I mean, is not aware of the internet, or a lot of things that we take for granted, or for us it's so matter of fact, like the realities of the world we live in. That's how cut off he has been from reality. And before I take over a show and turn this into a monologue, I'll let you ask me some questions as well.
No.
That's pretty much how the journey began.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you if you think, and I mean, and after all that you the initial encounters, that any proof that he was really lost, as it was stated?
Uh, yes, I mean, in fact, even after I wrote the piece, I thought there'll be a lot of people who come forward with, how it happens, right, in these cases, and say, "Oh, no, 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 I remember meeting him here, or I remember meeting him there, or this is what happened." I thought a lot of ex-cricketers would come out and talk about or want to meet him, right? It's happened in my career. I've met people in the Caribbean who ex-cricketers, contemporary cricketers who have kind of fallen off. I wouldn't take names on the show, but have fallen off out of favor with their teammates. And then I just have these connections in the Caribbean. I don't know, Michael. It was one of those things. I was this mad West Indies fan growing up in Bombay, and ever since I've just formed all these interesting connections over there. And but going back to what I was saying, there are some contemporary cricketers who have fallen out of favor, and like when I meet them, I know some of their teammates are like, "What? Like you're still in touch with him? I want to see him." Like, and that's what I assumed it would be like once I revealed the fact that Patrick Patterson is alive, and he's not in a uh, great position. That's why I shot the video as well. I mean, in this today's day and age, uh, the first thing people want to do is pick holes in whatever work. It's not just in journalism and anything else you do, right? That's pretty much what a lot of people use social media for. So it was almost evidence of not just the fact that he is there, that I didn't meet him. Of course, I had like took pictures of him, but just to give people an idea of what kind of state he's in. Not to like paint him in a negative light. That's why it's not a very long video. It's a very short video, and that picture is interesting that you just put up. I took him to a little cafe or a bar by the water. He used to go there apparently many years ago, and he wanted to go there and have some fish and a couple of beers. So that's why I shot the video, took this picture, but literally 15 minutes into our conversation there, and I'll be honest here, Michael, I realized that this is much more than a story. This is not just um, this is not just a connection that I'm going to have with this person as a journalist. For as journalists, right? Like you pursue a story for a long time, and when you meet that person or when you write it, it's almost the culmination of the whole journey. But for me, it felt like this is the beginning of something, because even during that conversation, I had to like really convince him that there aren't these evil forces really trying to get him or get me or get anyone who tries to help him. And it became that. It became almost my responsibility. Not that I expected it, but it became a responsibility to kind of convince him that he needs to keep fighting, he needs to keep living. And that's something that I still do. But to answer your question about finding proof whether he was lost or not, it came in the weeks and months after the story, where nobody really then wanted to go and seek him out, or no ex-teammates really were keen on finding out more about his whereabouts or finding out more about how he is, um, especially in the West Indies. People did get in touch with me from overseas and thanked me for at least finding him and kind of bringing him to the limelight to an extent. But then you realize that 4 years on, he was more lost than I thought he was, to be honest, Michael.
Well, it's quite interesting because and by the way, regarding the video, we'll come with a video shortly. And there was one thing I permit me if I bring it back again. I think you said about the RIA, the Rasta Intelligence Agency. Just a bit of laughter, but did enjoy that. But it's so interesting that the whole process in trying to get to him. And my question to you would be, how long it actually took for you to actually, from the start, to really get to Patrick Patterson, the subject of the matter?
It actually took me 6 years. I mean, 3 visits to the Caribbean, but 6 years where, I was scratching the surface for anyone or anything that could lead me to him. And that's why, I can tell you, I was triumphant in that little bar, and like you've been, I'm sure you've been to Kingston, or like it's
Yeah.
pretty much similar to
Mhm.
and you've been to Jamaica, and especially when you go inland, you've go across these little towns, little villages, beautiful villages, and they'll all have like a little shack on the side where people come in, and like, and it's almost like a convenience store, but where you get red stripe. So that's the most important thing. And I remember being very triumphant, like in 2013, when I found out that, and when someone said, "Oh, come, I'll take you to his parents' house," because if nobody knows, at least the parents would know, right? That's what I thought. But then once, like I said earlier, once I found out that even they didn't know, and his mother kept saying, "Oh, him a good boy. He's a good boy. He's a good boy." Like even though they're talking about someone who's in his 50s, or who was in his 50s back then. But just the way they spoke about him, I was like, wow, like this is bigger than I imagined. And yeah, it, and even when I wasn't in the West Indies, I was always trying to find some link, something that would at least give me proof. Because at some level, some people did not even know whether he was alive. That was how lost he was, or like people were about his being, really. And yeah, and then it took me eventually, well, let's say it started in June of 2011, and I found him in July of 2017. So it was like a 66-year long journey. And but I found him. It was just an amazing feeling. Just the first time I spoke to him, and then he said, okay, he doesn't remember anything, but he doesn't do meet anyone, but he'll meet me the next day. And then uh, he started almost getting paranoid again, and he said, no, no, he won't meet me. And then I actually, I'm, as you can see already, I'm a very gentle soul. Michael, I'm not very stern or very like but I did become that. Like I remember telling him on the phone, I said, all right, I mean, don't meet me, but I'll just tell you this: the world outside now, I'm someone who's spoken to you, maybe one of the few people who's spoken to you in the last 25 years, few human beings. So and I can see that you're not a madman. You're not like in some asylum. So but if you, so I just said this is just take this as advice coming from someone who's much younger than you. But someday just meet someone, tell them your real story. If not, people will keep assuming that you're a you're a madman, or whatever people used to say back then. And I don't know, it just something I said. And I also told him I'd gone seeking his parents. So he just, that evening when I called him one final time, I'd given up. I said, well, he's not going to meet me. But that evening when I called, he just said, I don't know, maybe something tells me I should meet you. Maybe it'll change my life. And that's when he finally accepted, or like he agreed to meeting me. So from start to end, it took me six years and a month, I guess.
Mhm. And the whole I don't know if it is your well, I started by saying an initiative. I don't know if it was your initiative to actually start the GoFundMe. Is it your initiative?
Yeah,
Okay,
very much so.
right. And so the next question is why you decided to start the GoFundMe even what 4 years after your article.
Um, and you know what? Ever since I started it 3 days ago, all I've been telling myself is, why didn't I do it earlier? And the answer really is because he didn't want me to. I mean, in the sense, he did not. Of course, he, like I said, he doesn't even know how the internet functions. Of course, he has no idea about what crowdfunding is. But that's the thing. Like, the 4 years since that article, I've literally become his window into the world outside. The person that he calls in good times. Yeah, I mean, I don't take selfies with cricketers at all, Michael. It's like too much professional pride. But I just thought I had to take this picture with him. This is like my last meeting just before I boarded my flight. So, uh, and in those 4 years, like we've had intense conversations. There have been times when uh, I've there was a time he could call me. He could at least speak to me for a couple of minutes after calling, because he had some money going. So but then I would always insist on, no, you don't, you just give me a missed call, I'll call you back. But there have been times he would call me, and I would look at my phone, and I'm like, it's like 2 a.m. in Jamaica, but and he would say a lot of things. Um, and there were times when I had to literally convince him why he should continue living and continue fighting. There were, like, very dark moments like that. But throughout those 4 years, Michael, every time I offered him help, he said no. He just said no. I said, I'll send you money. I said, there were times when he was in good spirits, and to the extent he wanted to know what these young fast bowlers are like. I remember when he heard, he has a transistor at home, so he can listen. He listens to the news, so he hears names of cricketers that play these days. So, like Kakiso Rabada, the first time he came onto the scene, I think he'd heard a couple of times about him. He's like, "What is he like? Tell me something about him." And those have always been our best conversations, when he tries to talk cricket or tries to think back to times when he was at the peak of his powers, or when he was playing county cricket or Sheffield Shield cricket for Tasmania over here in Australia. And it was or I remember Lungi Ingiri, when he made his debut for South Africa. A lot of people said his action reminded them of Patrick Patterson. So I would say I'll send you a smartphone. Like, I don't know how I would have explained how to get YouTube and all that, but I said, I'll send you a smartphone. I'll maybe send you a TV. Tell me what you want. Like, I'll do it for you. But he always refused any sort of financial help or any help at all, Michael. So that was one of the main reasons I could never do anything. And I'm sitting here in Australia, he's over in Jamaica, or in the past I was in India and he was in Jamaica. There's no way I could have really done anything without his initiative. Like, it's not like I could have sent him a surprise. That was just not possible, especially because I almost feel responsible for his privacy. Like, I cannot tell people where he is, or just send random people over, because that's really what sets off his paranoia. So that was the case till a month back, and then it was a month back when. And we've spoken pretty much every month. I would call him, just check on him, have a long chat with him about whatever is happening. Half the time it would be nothing. He would just go back to saying how difficult things are, and I was just here. I would just listen, hear him out really, and tell him to just continue fighting, or say whatever I can. I'm not a trained psychologist or a counselor, but I think in some ways I become one when I speak to him. I don't know how or why, but I just do. But it's just a month back, or a few weeks back, really, Michael. While we were talking, he just said that everything's run out. Yeah, I'm from whatever I've understood, he was living mainly of whatever the government. I don't know how the system works in Jamaica, but I'm guessing social welfare, like it exists here in Australia. We don't have social welfare back in India, of course, but that's what he was existing in. But for some reason, that stopped. So, and he said that my groceries have run out. Like, there's nothing to eat. So, for the first time, he said, "Can you do something for me?" And one part of me was not elated. I was relieved that finally, after all this while, he's asked for help and he's accepting help. And then I thought about it, like, how do I help him out here? He said, "Can you do something where I get like a regular income, like monthly income?" And I have been thinking of ideas where we could do something where there's some money that goes to him on a monthly basis. But then when he started talking about how desperate he was, and 3 days ago I was speaking to him again, and I got two missed calls pretty late at night, for late at night my time, like around this time, or just beyond this time. When I woke up, I was concerned, and I called him, and he said, "Can you do something for me urgently? I am desperate." And that's when I'd never tried crowdfunding before. I really did not know how it works. So, and the only website I knew was GoFundMe. So I just quickly went on to GoFundMe. I said, I need to do something, and I just started it. And or the only belief I had was, every time I tweeted about him, or even after the article came out, I realized that there is a lot of love out there for him, especially in India and around the world. So I thought, let's throw it out there. Let's see if that love, translates to people actually, supporting someone financially. And they have. It's incredible. It's already, I was just checking before I came online, Michael, and it's we like and I also started one in India because a couple of Indian cricketers, current Indian cricketers, got in touch with me and they said we want to contribute, but apparently they couldn't use the GoFundMe thing. So I started another one in India, so where on an Indian website, so that it becomes easier for Indians. And we've already just through these two fundraisers, there's been more nearly 11,000 US dollars, which has been collected, which is incredible. I'm just so touched that so many people have opened their arms and showered this man that brought so much entertainment to them 30 years ago. And it's just been 2 days, so that number is going to go up. And but that's pretty much why the initiative I mean, I said I have to take this initiative. I tried explaining what crowdfunding is to him, but I don't know how much he understood. But all he understood was that there is a lot of love out there in the world, and at times that's what you need as a person, right? Like you want, especially when you've gone this long, where you almost felt unwanted. So to even hear that there are a lot of people who remember you and want good things for you, I guess is more than money itself, which I he did say, and which we will come to later on in this conversation.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because I think this is where we are now. Looking at the GoFundMe, and it's actually in Australian dollars, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's one
that's
thing,
in
correct?
Australian dollars. Yeah, and then if you add the amount that's already been raised on the Indian side, that's around 180,000 rupees, which I think comes down to, my math's very bad, Michael, but I just did the math, putting everything together. I think that's around 3,000 Aussie dollars, if I'm not mistaken, 1,80,000. Yeah,
But
and yeah, so it's 10,000 US overall as of now, 10 or 11,000 US. So which is a big amount. And now it's just a question of the
how do you get the money to him?
exactly. And there are two or three ways that I have thought about, because you're talking about someone who, like I said earlier, he lives on the periphery of what we call reality, in the sense there's no bank account. He said his driving license expired a couple of years ago, and there aren't too many people that are close enough or that he trusts, because this is money which should reach his hands now. That's my responsibility. So that there are a couple of ways that I have thought about, or thought can be used to get it to him. But it's just a case of doing it. So once we reach our target, that will be my goal. Just for him knowing that there is money in his name, which has not existed ever before, or not in the last 25 years at least. And of course, you have to remember he was playing cricket when there wasn't that much money in cricket either. It's not like there was the IPL or central contracts back in the late 80s and the early 90s.
But are you a bit concerned that there isn't something in place for these former West Indies players? And my second part to that, have you had any reaction from the other stakeholders like the Jamaica Cricket Association, Cricket West Indies, WIPA? What other avenues have you challenged in terms of seeking any form of assistance for Patrick Patterson?
Um, I go back to my piece in 2017, Michael. I really thought that would, while it was about this the journalistic experience of finding this cricketer, and writing about him, I really thought it would set off this chain of events where people will come out and want to help him. And what really surprises me, even this time, like with the fundraiser, is while there has been like so much of support for him from India and England and even Australia, and I know a lot of people in the Caribbean. I haven't had too many people get in touch with me and say, "Oh, you know what? Oh, is it that bad? We want to help." Like yesterday, even Lancashire Cricket, they retweeted, and there are a lot of people, Lancashire fans, because he played a lot of cricket in Lancashire, in the Lancashire leagues, and for Lancashire. So they at least retweeted my tweet about the fundraiser, and a lot of people from Lancashire have contributed as well. But surprisingly, and it's a good question you asked, because I've been thinking about it for the last 2 days, Michael. Like, what has he done that, like, people like in West Indies cricket, or just West Indians in general, just don't, I don't know whether they don't care or they don't want to help, or I don't know what bridges were burnt when. It's strange. Like, I don't know. Like, I cannot picture him having done any harm to anyone in the last 25 years. So it's just, I'm surprised, like, that, yeah, I mean, okay, I started the fundraiser, but I thought, like, like you said, someone will come forward and say, uh, all right, I mean, is it that bad? We'll do something about it. Like you said, whether it's like, the Jamaican Cricket Association or REPA, like, but no, I mean, nobody seems to have even bothered to retweet or even mention it anywhere. I did see a piece somewhere, I think in the Trinidad Guardian, if I'm not mistaken, which I was very glad it appeared. Someone's written a piece about the fundraiser and given a link, so that's good. But yeah, it's been 2 days, but I haven't heard from anyone, nor has there been any kind of motion, because if they want to get through to him, or get some help to him, uh, uh, I'm not saying I'm the only way, but I think I am the only way. And um, but there's nothing that has happened, which surprises me. Like I said earlier, I don't know what could have gone so wrong that nobody, even like, people want to just turn a blind eye to someone who played um, for the for the West Indies. And like I said earlier, like, unlike those guys who went on the Rebel Tour, it's not like he went on the Rebel Tour and was ostracized. Like, unfortunately, a lot of those guys were. So yeah, I have no answers as to why nobody seems to care.
Anything to do with the name Patterson? I mean, Patrick Patterson. I mean,
I mean, look, that's the whole thing. Uh, maybe even they felt in the past that, oh, he is lost, something's not right with him, or something's up with him. But repeatedly, like, after my story, where I wrote all sides of him, and one of the main reasons, as a journalist, Michael, especially as a writer, it's very rare that you would bring yourself into a story, right? I mean, it's always you writing on someone. And in my nearly 15 years of experience, that's the only piece where I brought myself into the story. And the only reason I did that was, I didn't want to write it as a piece where, like, I'm just observing this guy and writing about him, almost painting his picture. But I wanted to bring out the human element in him, and the human element in the story, where it's like me meeting him. Like, it's my quest to find this guy, and what he's like right now, without really pointing fingers and judging him for, like, he's like this, he's like that, he doesn't remember anything. Like, it's more about a conversation and what people take from it. So now what I mean by all that is, so now people know what kind of position he's in, that he's uh yeah, he's not like, he's not, for example, in an asylum, as a lot of people have said in the over the years. And the fact is, I can tell you, he's not. And the fact that he is not uh, some dangerous man that you need to be wary of, or whatever people have been saying all these years. He's just a lonely man who's feels wronged. He just and it's I'll come to that conversation, the last conversation I had with him after I started the fundraiser, which to me really sums up his mindset, what he's been dealing with for the last 20 odd years. But why nobody, no, not a single cricketer who he played with wants to come out and do anything? I don't know. Like last year, or not, last 6 months ago, Michael, I was in Melbourne covering the India Australia series, and I was walking to the MCG. I was staying not too far from the MCG, and he was morning. I mean, it's morning of the. I think it was Boxing Day, and I got a missed call from him, Mr. Patterson. So I called him. I was speaking to him. I said, "Look, I'm going to the MCG," and he said, "Oh, do people really remember me there?" I said, "Of course. Like, yeah, I'll speak to Alan Border now. He'll be doing commentary. Of course, he remembers you. And he then asked me, oh, and it's during these conversations that his memory kind of he starts remembering things. Like he actually asked me, do the teams still stay on the other side of the river? And I said they do. I mean, they do stay on the other side of the Yara. And so I just tweeted about that little chat we had, saying, oh, he wanted to know. And and I know Sachin Tendulkar, the great former India cricketer, he saw the tweet, and then he kind of responded to it, saying, just saw this tweet. I hope that he is doing fine. It's so sad that someone I played against, an international cricketer who represented their nation, should fall on hard times in this way. But even after that, nothing really seemed to happen. So this is something that is holding back people, Patrick Patterson's teammates or the associations there, which I'm not aware of. But I guess there's something holding them back. There's nothing really that has happened.
Well, let's. I think it's about time for us to do a little of the. You mentioned that video, and I think it's probably about time that we hear what it have to say. And mind you, it's 4 years ago, right? 4 years ago.
It was.
And at that time, Patrick Patterson was 55, so he should be nearing 60 now, right?
He is. Yeah.
He is, right, 60 now. So we will play that video and then come back and chat with you on the other side.
People must ask you all the time, who was the fastest one of all of that crowd? And you kept all those great West Indian fast bowlers, didn't you?
Every now and then he made a very marked impression on me on a couple of occasions where I just said, well, I've never ever kept to anything this quick. And that was Patrick Patterson.
Well caught, beautiful catch, superb catch by Dujon.
About him, magnificent delivery.
That could be the end of it. Patrick Patterson, the bowler, the man they wanted. That's up in the air. Patterson strikes again. Yes, it's all over. Jim Patterson takes 5.
Patrick Patterson, who got the first breakthrough for the West Indies.
Alderman, like the rest, was no match for Patrick Patterson.
Where is Patrick Patterson? It's been one of the biggest mysteries in West Indian cricket for close to 2 decades. Several theories abound in Kingston's cricketing circles though. Some say he shifted base to the USA. Some say he drifted away to the wilderness due to drug abuse and destitution. Others say he's been in the mental asylum. And most say he's lost in the bush.
6 long years and a lot of journalistic serendipity to finally find Patrick Patterson. When I met him, I told him about all the urban legends that have turned into folklore about the man who once was the fastest and most menacing fast bowler in the world. Unfortunately, he responded to most of them as if he was hearing about them for the first time. Here's a brief snippet of my chat with him. Later on, you would develop this reputation of being this fast bowler that everybody was scared of. I mean, it's different when you're young and you can actually intimidate batsmen. So
that part of it, I can remember a little bit about, later on, like at the international level, because when we got, talked about, and you were sort of, notice it a little bit more, But I didn't really pay much attention to it then. We were just busy trying to enjoy,
Right.
as it go on, yeah.
Right. You picked for Jamaica pretty early. I mean, you kind of made your progress. Like progress was pretty rapid.
First class level we're talking. I'm going to do well. To recall all of these. No, serious, because I mentioned to you, because I'm so far away from it. Nothing around me to remind me really of the whole journey.
Right.
And it has been like that for a few years.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
20. I'm at this address for 20 odd years.
20 odd years?
Yeah, 20 plus, yeah.
Right.
And like I said, there's nothing where I am to remind me about what we're talking about. Because, yeah, that's how it is.
Right.
So, like, trying to talk about it now, I have to try to...
You have to rack your brains.
Serious, racking, yeah.
But
we'll try, yeah?
Yes, we'll try. And only today someone was talking about this mini test that happened between Jamaica and Barbados right here, where it was you, Walsh, and a couple of others versus Ghana.
Michael Olding.
Yeah, and Michael Olding, yes, Michael Olding was there yet. Yeah. And then there was Ghana, Marshall, Milton Small, and there was this ball. I'm sure you remember this ball. Gordon Greenidge walked out to bat, and you hit him right here on the chest. And apparently the starch just like went poof. And I think 2 balls later, Gordon Greenidge just nicked one and like got out. You remember that?
We're going to take some remembering. Vaguely, yeah?
Right.
To be honest, vaguely, yeah?
Right.
I can remember the atmosphere, it was like you said, it was a test atmosphere.
Right.
To recall, the personal performances, it's going to take some doing.
Right.
I hope you understand.
No, I totally understand.
Because it is so,
I totally understand.
Very much so, yeah?
Yes, absolutely. And to read the entire story, please log on to the Indian Express.
Quite interesting indeed, and many times he keeps saying, he's quite far from the whole reality. He's far from it, and obviously after 20-something years and not being in the process, it took quite a while and quite some digging for you to kind of refresh his brain as to some of and it also appears that he is not the type that wants to be celebrated. He seems to be humble, and that's why I was trying to get to the whole issue of whether or not you think that due to his high level of privacy, he's very private, that there isn't this outpouring or this outreach to him, whether or not, as you said, you in India and then now in Australia, so far away, whether there may have been approaches, and because of his privacy, they have not been able to get to him. You have been, prodding and getting to him, and whether or not the others have just given up because he is just private.
It's possible. I'm sure. Like you correctly said, there's a lot of humility. Despite everything that has happened to him, even when he does tend to recall some things, like we've tried. I have tried different ways of helping him, trying to remember things. Like I call him and I read out scoreboards, and one day I just thought a couple of years ago that if people can't remember their own feats, if they hear names of cricketers that they played with or against, maybe things might, especially teammates at county level or Sheffield Shield level, memories might come back, and it actually helped. It would start coming back, and even there, whenever I would bring up like anything about him doing something special, he would not really talk himself up too much, which really talks to that humility you mentioned, Michael. And I'm sure people have tried to reach out, like within Jamaican cricket circles or even elsewhere, and whether it's him wanting to be private or whether him just being paranoid about everything that has been said about him, and in those 20 years before 2017, maybe it's very possible that he just pushed people away. But it, like the last conversation I had with him, and it was pretty emotional. I'll say, when I started telling him about the outpouring of love and the money that now belongs to him, that he has money in his name, but he actually said that for all the money that you talk about or whatever you've done in the last 3 days. Just the fact that I've had you in my life in the last 4 years, and I find it awkward talking about it because it's the person he's talking about is me. But like he said, that this is the first time I've been able to really, be myself, open up, and just speak the way I want to, and know that you'll still stand by me. You'll just not go away, because you haven't gone away ever, since you met me. So it's that means much more to me than any amount of money you'll be able to spend, or send to me. I've not eaten in a few days now, but again, that I'm ready to accept. But what you let me do, which is kind of help me deal with my demons of the past, just by listening or just by talking to me, means a lot more to me. So I'm sure just that level of trust that I guess it's between, if you look at it, there is nothing that should connect me and him as people, right? I'm 36, he's in his late 50s, nearly 60. I grew up in India, far away from Jamaica. There's really no connection except cricket, I guess. But that's how people come together in this world, or always have, just randomly. We all connected in different ways. We just get linked. But, going back to your question, Michael, I'm sure people have tried to reach out, and maybe they were pushed away in some way or the other in the past. But the fact that even now, after I have made this whole thing very public in the last 4 years, not just with my piece and with the fundraiser, but even in between, I always try to talk about him wherever I go, and I've spoken a lot about him over the years. That people just still feel that they shouldn't. I don't know. I'm not even saying they should seek him out and go give him a hug, but they could contribute to the fundraiser, maybe, or at least talk about it, spread the word. But the fact that doesn't happen is what surprises me. Not the fact that, they aren't doing what I'm doing. That's not how it works, right? In this world, that it has to be it's a two-way street. I mean, he doesn't easily trust people, clearly, but now there is a medium. I am that medium, I guess, or the fact that you could just, Lancashire Cricket, they didn't do anything, they didn't put out a statement, but just retweeting or spreading awareness of the fundraiser in itself is enough in this case, I would believe. But the fact that hasn't happened kind of makes me wonder what must have gone wrong, or what the history is to all that.
Okay. And it also begs the question as to whether or not young cricketers, after hearing and seeing the likes of Patrick Patterson and others, and what they are going through, what they are experiencing, whether or not the young cricketers will tend to gravitate towards more, and there's more fuel now for the young cricketers to gravitate towards the big bucks, like the IPL, the Big Bash, CPL, and others. Do you share that view as well?
Well, it's happening as we speak around the world, Michael, and there are a lot of people who hold it against cricketers, but I have always believed that it's an individual decision. I mean, this whole pressure that no, you should always your only goal, the first goal has to be that you play test cricket for your country or your nation or your team. I don't think there has to be that kind of pressure on anyone. I mean, you choose whatever you want, whatever path you want to choose. I mean, we've seen, for example, Kyron Pollard. He's, I guess, never going to play test cricket for the West Indies. Does that make him an incomplete cricketer, or does it make him anything? Not really, in my book. I mean, he's indirectly or directly done more as much for West Indies cricket as those who played a lot of test cricket. It does not lessen his impact as a cricketer. And now he's captaining the West Indies in white ball cricket. So it's the choices are there, the options are there. My advice would be, if do whatever suits you. And the thing is that, Patrick Patterson and those cricketers who are lost, not lost, who are on, have hit hard times, are examples that we all should learn from. You don't take anything for granted, and you own up to your own decisions. And at least they played in an era where there was no money, so there's not that there was any, it's not like he blew all his money away. There was not that much money back then, right? I mean, and it's true for anyone who played in that era. So yeah, at least I feel because of these leagues around the world, not just the IPL is the wealthiest or the richest of the leagues, but there's so many more options, which is a good thing. Which means that if you, at one point in your career, whatever stage it is, early on, maybe you realize that maybe this whole goal of playing Test cricket is not my cup of tea, you can still make a great living by playing in these leagues, which is good. I mean, you don't want to see anyone, for that matter, but especially professional sports persons, who do so much to entertain so many people around the world, fall on hard times and end up like Mr. Patterson has right now. So it's a lesson for everyone. Like I said, don't take anything for granted, but I'm glad that there are many options. I'm not one of those people who will say that, oh no, these leagues do only evil to cricket.
And at his age, as we say, nearing 60, do you think there is still some place for Patrick Patterson in terms of the West Indies landscape, West Indies cricket landscape? Not as a player, though, but how the other legends are making some level of contribution. Do you think there is some place for Patrick Patterson?
Personally, I think that ship might have sailed in terms of him maybe wanting to coach or anything, purely because he's just so not used to being around people and being around cricket. I don't think he has that self-confidence to be out in public, really. And if you want to coach, you have to be out in public. So like I said, even in that last conversation, he's almost accepted the fact that he will be by himself for whatever, maybe the rest of his life. I mean, he'll have people like me who I'll be that person who'll stand by him virtually, if not in Jamaica. But I guess his happiness in life will come from just knowing that he's still there's still someone looking out for him, so that he kind of can cope with everything that he feels has gone wrong in his life, all the things that he feels people have, the many ways that people have wronged him over the years. So I think, in the way I look at it, his life will be the rest of his life will be spent that's such a great picture. Yeah, the rest of his life will be spent kind of overcoming whatever the demons of the past. But I think that does not mean that his story, like we said earlier, Michael, should not be a great example, a lesson for a lot of people around the world. It's you just need to reach out. Like you said earlier, maybe people did try to help him in the past and he pushed them away, and therein lies your lesson. You need people. As human beings, we are social beasts, social animals, so we need people. Don't push people away. You never know, you might never get them back. So I think he will always be like a living lesson in that way. Cricketing wise, I think he's just so cut off from cricket. He's been for so long. I don't know what he can offer, and even if he can offer, whether he'll ever be confident enough to be out in a public space.
And how you think conversations like these, you chatted with me, you chatted with others, will help to really stimulate and bring awareness, not just to Patrick Patterson, but as we say, there are probably other West Indian legends, other cricketers. And I don't just want to stick on West Indies. Yes, we're talking about West Indies here, but there are a number of cricketers who made that sort of contribution to the sport, and they have just gone off into the wilderness. Some we have never heard about again. So how you hope that this sort of awareness can, stimulate interest even among the various cricket boards to have something in place to see after the welfare of their former cricketers. Probably Australia and others may have something in place, but the West Indies in particular.
Yeah, I mean, it's very important. Like you said, the BCCI, the Board of Control for Cricket in India, that way has been very good with its ex-cricketers. They all are on pension schemes, and most of them are well taken care of now. I mean, in the last 10, 15 years, they have been. So something like, and look, we have to face the fact that not all cricket boards around the world are as wealthy as the BCCI. Maybe apart from India, Australia, and England, the other cricket boards are always fighting a financial battle in some way or the other. So it might not be easy to kind of contribute to the well-being or not well-being, or to take care of your ex-cricketers the way these boards do. But I guess it's very important, at least to, with players associations and all that, to keep a check on ex-players. Just it doesn't even mean they need to go and have like a pension scheme, but like you said, Michael, at least be aware of where they are. I mean, and it's not very difficult to get a list of players who have played for your country or internationally for the West Indies. Just maybe have a committee who just all they do is seek out these kind of players who, like you said, we haven't heard of in a long time, or maybe never, and just find out what they're doing. Maybe some people are doing well, they just don't want to be in any sort of limelight anymore, or maybe they've had enough of cricket. But just keep a tab on everyone. I'm guessing that's something we learn through stories like this. Like as I was telling you earlier, Patrick Patterson might be an extreme, but there are so many others. Like Winston Benjamin was another story I had written in 2017. I mean, he's a wonderful guy. He still does a lot of coaching. Alzari Joseph was coached by Winston Benjamin. His son is an athlete in the US, but I found him, and he was putting up boundary boards at the Sir Vivian Richards Stadium in Antigua. And I remember doing an interview with him, and he, his honest work, honest dollar for an honest day's work, he'd said. And it was funny because I was told that he was in charge of the whole operation, but once I went there, I saw that he was just one of the many guys who were, handling the boat. So while he was doing it, I was having a chat, and the people in charge of the company, who have all rights to in-stadia, or the in-stadia rights generally end up being Indian. So one of them came and kind of semi-yelled at Winston Benjamin, saying, "Hey, don't be chatting while you're doing your job. Go back to doing your work." And I felt really bad. I said, "Look, that should not happen." So I walked up to the Indian guy later, and I said, "Do you know who you're talking to?" And he's like, "What? What do you mean?" He's just like one of the guys. "You should not. Please don't disturb our people." And I said, "No. He's a former West Indies cricketer. He played 100 ODIs for." And the guy was so apologetic, and he called Winston Benjamin, apologized to him, and Winston Benjamin was pretty upset with me for and he was like, "That's not a big deal. It's just not India. It doesn't matter what work I do. I'm just a former cricketer now." So there was no reason for you to tell him who I am and create this awkwardness. And but where I come from, Michael, because cricketers get heralded and worship the way they are, not just the top stars, but anyone who plays cricket for India. That's where I was coming from. But then you realize that it's, of course, culturally it's different everywhere. Even in Australia, it's not the same as India. But it's just so important that they kept a tab on, just to know if in case someone needs help, that you're there. It's not that you're caught unawares, of people who have played for your country. That's the least I think any board can do. I'm not saying everybody should go out and help, but at least know, so that tomorrow if you find out, oh no, maybe this person needs help, you're there for them.
Probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, these guys would have been dubbed rock stars in the Caribbean, albeit now, sad. But I know it's not his obituary But seeing as you're very close to him, and we're speaking about Patrick Patterson, if you have to share a story about Patrick Patterson to someone, what would you tell them? Who would you tell them Patrick Patterson is? Well, what would you like him to be remembered as? I mean, for me, I know him as the one with the quick and that front foot, that front foot. I think it was mesmerizing to batsmen and things like that. So, but how would you want him to be remembered? And again, I'm saying it's not his obituaries, but just telling that story.
No, I mean, I think you hit the point, the nail on the head earlier, Michael. Like, he's just a humble man, and for someone who's been through so much in his life, he still doesn't look at the world in like very cynically. He just looks at whatever happened in his past, which some of it I touched on in the story as well, which I wrote in 2017, the way he was treated when he was playing in England and to an extent even in Australia. He just looks at it as things that shouldn't have happened to him, but he still hangs in there in many ways. And there are dark days, but he still stays so humble and real, despite his life not being as real as it is for others in the context of the world we live in. And I think that's he's just a very sweet guy. Like, even in that little video clip that you showed, you can see that he's not like getting angry with the fact that he can't remember anything, and it doesn't it doesn't piss him off really. I've never heard him get angry about anything. Like, he just, it's disappointment more than anger. And at times I wish I could be like that. Like, my life's been pretty I've been very fortunate in my life in many ways, but even then, like, little things irk me like which don't do with him. And that's, like you said, of course he'll always be remembered as that, like Graham Gooch said, the only bowler who he's ever been scared for his life, like, while facing, this is Graham Gooch, who was not scared of facing any fast bowler ever. So that'll be his legacy. But for me personally, it'll be just this guy who's been through so much, but never gets angry. It's like, and even when like, we're living in a world where, especially in today's day and age, where people are just so full of themselves, Michael. Like, at most people are like, they just this whole thing about talking up your achievements and this instant gratification, or just this constant constant quest for gratification, or like, look at me, this attention seeking generation, or like era that we live in. All of us are guilty of it at some level. To have someone who's almost like, when you go tell him like, no, look, you were this great fast bowler, and even when he does recall few things, he does it with such like, nah, but it's really, yeah, it was one of those days. Yeah. Like, I'll give you an example, like the whole thing about the folklore about how he walked into the MCG dressing room and threatened the Australian cricketers. And I'm sure you've heard the story where Don Bradman apparently walked into the West Indies dressing room, and Patrick Patterson said, if I ever bowl to you now, I'll knock you in the head. Like, I'll knock you off. I'll hit you in the head. And it's been part of folklore for a long time. And I remember back in 6 months ago when I was at the MCG, and I just met MCG, and like he said, can you please tell people that never happened? Like, why would I threaten anyone like Don Bradman? Like, he's one of the greats of the game. And like, and not talk of it as like, oh, yes, of course, I was this gung-ho fast bowler. At my peak, I could gun anyone down, and including Bradman. There's no bravado in the fact that he was this fast bowler that people feared, which is something I think for me will always be his legacy, even though in contrast, that was what he was known for.
Mm-hmm. Well, and in your piece also, you wrote that, and that is when you were sitting with him near the waterfront, that at times he tend to be, and I'm quoting you, lucid, and his mind seems to be in a state of flux, swinging between reality and imagination. And you made reference to, for example, he never knew, at some point in time, he never knew that women played cricket, you know, and what he referred to also as, you know, why the Indian Prime Minister visited Israel after so many years. I mean, when you were speaking to him, was there at any point in time there became, you know, there was some level of frustration, either on your part or on his part, that you got a sense that he was frustrated about the whole process of being interviewed, and, you know, not at times not being, you know, very effective in terms of his memory, because at that, oh, I can't recall that, and, you know, that will have to go way back when, and these sort of things. Were you getting that impression that, you know, he was losing his mind at times during that interview?
No, in fact, it was me who was getting frustrated. Not with the fact that he wasn't like remembering things. Like, you know, as a journalist, even while you're interviewing someone, or when you're chatting to someone or talking to someone, you're always thinking of what it will look like up here, like, you know, when it appears in print. Like, that's how we are trained, we are built. I wasn't getting that string at all, and, like, you know, I'm tugging at everything, and which is one of the main reasons I wrote it almost as this whole quest to find him, and this whole setting the whole scene up for how I meet him and what happens there, rather than just writing the story about this guy who I met. And he wasn't getting frustrated at all. Like, he was, even in the video, you can see he's smiling and laughing about the fact that he doesn't really remember much. And more than anything, he was just happy that, I guess, someone did put so much effort in. That's what it's always come across. Every phone call ends with this massive outpouring of gratitude towards me, because I have always, like, you know, sought him out, and, like, you know, just to check on him. Back then it was to find him, and it was more that, I think, than, you know, him getting frustrated about, and even today, like, you know, there are times he says that, oh, sorry if I sound frustrated. I'm like, no, I don't think you sound frustrated. But like, the frustration from my side, not frustration, but just sort of helplessness during that conversation I had with him on the waterfront, was when he kept referring to these evil forces that were about to get him. He doesn't mention them anymore. And after a while, it really, Michael, felt like speaking to, at some level, to a child that day, because you know how it is, right? Like, I kept telling him, no, we will not mention these evil forces, because I'm talking about something that was positive in your life. You are not going to bring them up. And then there were times I would say something and he would say, yeah, but, like, you know, they are out there. And I was like, there is no they. And then he started correcting himself, like, you know, like, okay, yeah, you're right. There are no evil forces. They don't exist and all that. And then he would come back to saying, now I'm really scared of what would happen to you. Like, you know, because whenever people try to help me, bad things happen to them. So now I'm very worried about you. So that was kind of like, you know, and like I said very early on in the conversation, I'm just a journalist. Like, you know, I can't read the mind, and, like, you know, I'm not trained to deal with that. So it was very challenging. I wouldn't say frustrating, to kind of make sense of, or to keep him grounded, like, you know, keep him lucid, which, but it's changed so much since that conversation. Like, you know, our conversations have evolved, for sure, like, you know, but there are times where, like, you know, with the whole pandemic, last year, when it really came to the fore, it was very difficult explaining to him how the extent, the scale of the pandemic, considering, like, you're so cocooned in your little bubble, right? Like he is. And look, we're talking about bubbles all over the world now, but his life has been in a bubble. So it was very difficult for him. So it does get a little difficult explaining things to him, but otherwise he never gets frustrated, though.
Mm-hmm. What's about his family? Any kids? You know, what have you been able to discover regarding his family?
So he had said in that during that meeting that he had 2 kids who are in Canada. He never got married, and they used to help him. He had met them in the past, many years ago. I think sometime in the 90s or the early 2000s. They had come and He had even driven them around. His dad passed away last year. Yes, I think it was last year. His dad passed away last year, and I know because that was one of those times he was really shaken. He was. It took me like two conversations to understand that his dad had passed away. So of course, the information. I don't know. I don't know how they got back in touch or how he found out that his dad passed away, but his dad had passed away. I think he has a sibling who lives in their hometown, if I'm not mistaken. That's about it. Like, yeah, I mean, he mentions relatives who at times in the past have helped him, but I think the relations have been cut, ties have been cut in years since. But yeah, when it comes to close family, I think apart from his mother and his sister, I think I'm not aware of anyone. I don't know what happened to the kids, why they don't come anymore. But the only thing I remember him mentioning back then in 2017 is they lived in Canada.
Okay. And there's one thing in that story that every time, I read the story a couple of times, and every time I read that, I laughed at it. It was to the end of your story where he told you that they tapped his phone, and is another way he believes that, these sort of lucid and, imagination that they tapped his phone. Do you think he still believes that his phone is tapped?
Not anymore. Yeah, like I said, those things kind of ended that day. Like, he's never brought those things up again. Like, this whole thing of those evil forces, like, who wanted to drag him to the mental asylum. Like, he'd said about how one day he heard on the radio, not now, many years ago, that he was in an asylum, or he should be in an asylum, and he was always scared that people would come for him and all that. But I think he's never, those things have been replaced. And I think I want to give myself some credit here. In all our conversations, I always take him back towards cricket and try to read scoreboards and do all that, and or tell him what's happening in the current state of cricket, and or something. I tell him about my life, and I mean, he's aware that my wife's a teacher. He knows that we went and got a dog. He knows, when I'm on tour, I always tell him where I am, kind of which ground I'm at and those things. So I so over time, I don't think he believes in the fact that people are out to get him. He doesn't, that phone tapping thing was that really tells you about the paranoia. And when you live with that kind of paranoia and fear for that long, of course it will affect you and affect the way you live. So I'm glad that those things have he's, I guess, moved on from, or he doesn't mention anymore. Hopefully that's all in the past. But yeah, he's very comfortable speaking on his phone these days, especially with me.
All right. Well, for folks, yeah, Patrick Patterson, that was in his heydays. The fear, he was feared in terms of his pace, and had a number of batsmen ducking, as they were saying. The great Patrick Patterson, and he will be 60 in September 15th to be exact. He'll be 60 years. Patrick Patterson, and that's in of more recent, albeit 4 years ago, when you spoke to him in Kingston, the waterfront harbor in Kingston. Well, I want to thank you on that aspect of Patrick Patterson, but seeing as you're with me and we talk in cricket, I can't let you leave without us going further and talk more in depth on cricket and some aspect of cricket. And I want to start off with the West Indies home series. Well, a busy schedule, summer schedule. South Africa, Australia, Pakistan, and then England, early 2022. Busy schedule for the West Indies. And it comes on the heels of, the whole reopening, albeit what we see in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, the South Africa series being moved and shared between St. Lucia and Grenada.
Yeah.
But what is your whole assessment in terms of, let's look first of all at the South Africa series. South Africa most likely will be looking to groom some new players, blood some new players for that series against West Indies.
Yeah, and it's amazing, right? Like since the pandemic began, Michael, I think West Indies and England have played more cricket than any other team. They've just played so much, which is really good, and it's given a lot of their young players to develop. And it's perhaps the first time that there is a West Indies South Africa series in the last 20 years at least, or maybe longer, maybe since South Africa's readmission after that first tour, where the West Indians would sense a chance of beating South Africa. And South African cricket has been through a lot of turmoil in the last year or so, in terms of administration, like the governments and politics of the cricket board. Till 2 weeks back, we thought, will the South African team exist as we know it? It had gotten that bad. And so generally when there's so much turmoil behind the scenes, it does show on on performances and on team combinations on the field. And they are a young team. There are a lot of unknowns about that team in terms of structure, and now Faf du Plessis has moved on as well. So it'll, like I said, for the first time in my cricket covering career, but maybe even cricket viewing career, where West Indies in my book start as almost favorites against the South African team. And they are rebuilding as well, whereas the West Indies, I guess, just based on the performances in Bangladesh, finding Mayers and Bona and those guys, it just seems like there's some sort of an established look to the Test 11, which is great. And it's great that they're going to play a lot of cricket consistently and continuously against some big teams, albeit it'll be more white ball stuff against Australia. But I'm really looking forward to the Test series. West Indies beating South Africa will be very sweet.
An opportunity for Captain Craig Brathwaite to at least show that he means well as captain, and it wasn't just a flukes.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was interesting listening to him, especially during the Bangladesh series, where, he would literally after every day's play, he was so surprised or pleasantly surprised by all these performances being, put in by his players. And, it's amazing. He's been around for a decade now. I remember covering Craig Brathwaite in his second series against India in 2011. That seems like a long time back, but he looks pretty much the same. It's like he still looks like the Craig Brathwaite of 2011. He's, for all his limitations, and I've watched him live hit his first class six. It came in a West Indies A versus India A match in Shimoga in rural Karnataka in 2013. So I was there. I was one of the few people, Michael, who've seen Craig Brathwaite hit a six in first-class cricket in his first one. It's Jason Holder. I think, there's been so much spoken about the captaincy being taken from him, but I'm a huge Jason Holder fan, and I just think that he's had this responsibility on his shoulders for such a long part, major part of his career. He was handed captaincy so early on. I think it's good for Jason Holder, the cricketer and the person, that someone else does it, so that he can grow more. And we in fact saw him get more vocal, in the series against Sri Lanka when Craig Brathwaite was captaining. So it's good. And there's something about Craig Brathwaite, he's just so grounded, just not in the way he bats, but just the way he is. So I think he'll do a good job leading the West Indies over the next 2 or 3 years, just in terms of that just calmness that he brings to proceedings.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the depth of West Indies cricket now, probably a year, 2 years ago, it was difficult, to put together a strong West Indies team, and I'm saying strong in the context of availability of players. Now, West Indies players are really fighting for a spot on the first 11. Do you think it's a good sign for West Indies cricket?
It's an extraordinary sign for West Indies cricket. Like, you're right, for the longest time, and this is no offense to your countrymen, but how many times have we seen Devon Smith being brought back to the West Indies playing 11? And and it said as much about his hunger for runs as it did about the fact that not too many others were coming through the ranks. And we've seen someone like Jermaine Blackwood play Test cricket, lose his spot, go back and score a lot of runs in domestic cricket, and come back and become a better cricketer. I mean, Kyron Powell's made a comeback to the camp, at least, after scoring a lot of runs in domestic cricket. Again, same 2011 batch. Kyron Powell, Kirk Edwards, who's since faded away, Adrian Bharat, who's actually a very good friend of mine, Craig Brathwaite. They're the 2011 batch of West Indies cricket. So that's actually as good a sign as the fact as so many young guys or new guys are coming in. Even Bonner, I mean, he is another one who's been scoring a lot of runs in first class cricket. Sharma Brooks is another one. So it's a good sign that there are so many guys suddenly battling for batting spots, especially. I think even though there's been so much said about West Indies and the bowling attack's not as good as it was in the past, but I think that's just very unfair comparison. We've still seen a lot of fast bowlers come in through the system in the last few years, but batting's been a problem, and it's a great sign that they're jostling for spots in the batting lineup.
Mm-hmm. And following the Bangladesh series, the victory, there were those who will argue that is nothing for the West Indies to really celebrate until such time that they come up against teams like Australia and England and South Africa. But now the test is really on, and when I say test, I mean test in the West Indies, really on, because they have almost back-to-back series. What you think, or what should West Indies be looking at? Is it the actual victories, or as the coach said some time ago, is the consistency in the performance of the West Indies?
Well, firstly, beating Bangladesh in Bangladesh, Michael, is a huge task. And I remember mentioning this or writing this after that series, when they clean swept Bangladesh in Bangladesh. The last team to have clean swept Bangladesh in Bangladesh were West Indies, but that happened 6 or 7 years prior to it happening. Prior to it happening this year. So it's there have been so many teams who've gone and failed to beat Bangladesh in Bangladesh. You name it. So I think it was a great achievement. This is not the Bangladesh of 2005. This is the Bangladesh of 2020, 2021. They have become a very strong team at home. So it was a big achievement. But yes, I mean, you want that consistency. And I as a self-confessed West Indies fan, I get very annoyed when people just jump on the West Indies bandwagon every time they win one test match, and there's this talk of they're back, and it's nothing's I think West Indian cricket will improve the day people stop talking about the fact that they're back, or the international cricket needs a good West Indies team. Nothing like that. They're just another team who need to be consistent, like you said. And consistent not in just terms of winning, but in putting together a strong playing 11 every time, having guys fight for places, things that we spoke about in the last 10 or 15 minutes, which is happening. The streamline of cricketers coming through the system, that's the breeding ground is improving. There are more stars and more big talents emerging, which is a very good sign for West Indies cricket across all formats. I think that it's not just T20 or white ball cricket, but Test cricket as well. I think that is a good sign for West Indies cricket. Someday, they will go to India and beat India in India, and they come to Australia and beat Australia in Australia. Maybe finally win a series in England. They always go and win that Test match, and then I almost feel that if they don't win win a test early on, it's good for this West Indies team, especially in England, because they go. You know how the English press is, my friends in the English press. They jump on this West Indies bandwagon. Suddenly, West Indies is the greatest team in the world, and then they lose. So I think it's just at times they just want people to let the West Indies be, and that'll be the best thing for them. But all the signs are there, and not many teams come and beat Australia in Australia. Not many teams go to India and beat India in India. That rarely happens. So them not being able to do that does not mean anything in my book.
Right. And so that's as it relates to South Africa, but another big test for West Indies will be the Australia series. And as I said, these series are coming really back to back. Not much, room for West Indies to wiggle, because when one series is being played, probably the next team is already in the region getting ready for the next one. And Australia obviously will be a big one that the West Indies will be looking at.
Yeah, and Australia haven't played cricket at all. Like, I'm the Australian correspondent for Cricbuzz, so it's my job to cover Australian cricket, and they don't. And ever since I moved here, they did not play too much cricket. Or there's been so much that's been happening, but there have been so many tours that have cancelled. South African tour, which everybody was looking forward to, was of course cancelled because of the pandemic. And last year there was a few series supposed to happen here, which got cancelled. So it'll be a big test for the Australians, because a lot of their players were in that IPL, which got suspended. So they're still quarantining in Sydney. Those who managed to come in from the Maldives. So it'll be a big test for them. It'll be very interesting to see. They have named a big provisional squad, Cricket Australia, but it'll be interesting to see how many of those guys actually end up going to the West Indies, because it doesn't end there. It's still, they come back, and then there's the T20 World Cup, whether it's in India or in the UAE. And then then it's the Ashes. So I don't know, the likes of Pat Cummins and Steve Smith, who have been in like IPL bubbles, and have just come back, whether they will be making that tour. But like whether they do or not, it'll still be like a strong Australian team. Their T20 cricket has really picked up in the last few years. Glenn Maxwell's really come into his own. Aaron Finch is a really good captain, and it'll be great. And Australia West Indies, there's always that's a needle. It might not be the same as the 70s, but every time Australia and West Indies play, I'll miss my dear Marlon Samuels. I always want Marlon Samuels in a West Indies Australia series, because that's when the best, it almost brings out the best in both teams. But I guess Marlon's moved on. But it'll be great fun. There'll be some noodle, and not just for the West Indies. It'll be a big tour for a lot of these Australians who've not played international cricket as much as they would have liked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then obviously the Pakistan team will follow Australia as the penultimate series, and the last series for the West Indies in 2021, before taking on England in early 2022. Another tough battle between both teams, and they have always bring out the best in each. When they do meet each other, Pakistan, West Indies.
Yeah, the cliche with both teams is you never know which Pakistan team or which West Indies team is going to show up. And that's one cliche in cricket that I believe in, because it's true. You never know, they can have the best of days, but they can also have the worst of days. The same team, that too. And Pakistan, especially in the last couple of years, there's a lot of amazing young talent that's come through. They always have a lot of youth in their bowling attack, but we're seeing up and down the order in all formats. The PSL has been very good for Pakistan, just as the CPL has been for the Caribbean. A lot of young talent coming through, and a lot of exciting players. Last year, when Pakistan was over in Australia, we saw the birth of Naseem Shah, 16-year-old Naseem Shah, and the growth of Shaheen Shah Afridi. So I know Naseem Shah is battling injury at the moment, but it always makes for exciting cricket, and it has a lot to do with you don't know which side of the bed either team is going to wake up from. But like you correctly said, Michael, they do bring out the best in each other, and they have historically.
Mm-hmm. And then England, West Indies will be going up against England, albeit they were the first to during the pandemic. They basically were like the guinea pigs for cricket. If they, to see how things are going regarding the pandemic, and successfully in terms of the bubble, the whole cricket bubble. So they'll be meeting again, and I assume that both teams, well, I shouldn't say both teams, but West Indies in particular, maybe looking to really settle a score this time at home.
And England don't win much in the Caribbean, do they? And there's always some extraordinary performances by individual players in the West Indies. Yeah. Whenever England travel, I mean, if you go back into 2009 and Jerome Taylor, or Jason Holder and Shane Dowrich,
Cotley Ambrose,
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, England just bring out the best in the best and rarely the worst, but the best in the West Indies, and it'll be after the Ashes as well, so it'll have a lot of it'll be interesting what happens to England in Australia. By the time they go to the West Indies, and hopefully by then most of the world is vaccinated, and I remember the late Tony Cozier telling me once about how the GDP of Barbados grows every time there's an England tour because of the Barmy Army. And so it'll be, that's one thing, one charm about England, watching England play in the West Indies is having the Barmy Army in the stands. It's different to, I know people talk up the Indian crowds, but it's just very different watching the Barmy Army, especially in the West Indies. So hopefully by then the world has opened up. Maybe I can meet you in person, Michael, by then. And that'll be a fun tour. It's always a fun tour to watch, even on TV.
Yeah, England always bring out the best. And as you say, the Barmy Army, not just in Barbados, but also Antigua. I know they always they have a favorite in Antigua as well, with that. But interesting enough, though, there has been a lot of talk recently about young, I don't know if you have been following it, young Hetmyer from Guyana, and the whole issue about his fitness, and all the talk surrounding him. And interesting enough, most of the talk coming from, let's say, Guyana, his birthplace. And chief selector is actually from Guyana, Roger Harper, does it say something that Roger Harper probably is seeing something that the ordinary person may not be seeing, that of Hetmyer, and he's more interested in the cricketers' development more so than anything else? And he's seeing talent, he's seeing something, and very much interested in the cricketers' development. But personally, what have you made of Shitna Hetmyer?
One of the last tours or last series I covered before leaving India was the West Indies tour of India in 2018. And wow. Shimron Hetmyer was one of the stars of that series, especially the one-day leg where I think he made 100, and he really emerged as the one to watch. And I remember writing a story on him, Michael. It was an interesting story because I spoke to his coaches back in Guyana, and one of them had actually moved to the US. And while a lot of them spoke highly of how talented he was, there was this he was 6 years old when he used to accompany his older brother to club games, and during the lunch break people would just watch Hetty hit sixes, even though he was just 6 years old. And he always has had that reputation of being super talent, someone who can hit the ball a long way, and which makes you a lot of money in today's day and age, of course. But what was also interesting is a lot of people, everybody I spoke to, had this massive say on his personal life. Without getting into the details, I'm sure a lot of people who have followed his career might guess what I'm talking about. A lot of people were these coaches and his seniors were more bothered by, like I said, the decisions he was taking in his personal life than what he was doing on the field. And this is when he was at his peak in 2017. These days there's so much more talk of Nicholas Pooran, but back then in 2017, he was looked at as the next big thing of West Indies cricket, especially scoring runs, the way he was scoring runs and doing it in India. A couple of them even said, you should go advise him to make better choices in his personal life. And I was like, I don't even know the kid. I've never even met him. It was just one coach was upset that after scoring that first 100, he did not, thank the Lord. He thanked someone else before the Lord, and he said that's not done. That tells you he's not humble enough. And I was like, wait, I'm here trying to write a positive story, but people are just talking about his personal life. So, which told me that he's always divided opinions, not just in the Caribbean, but in Guyana. I guess it's tough when you have a system like that, when you, as the selector, represent or you are from that island like Roger Harper is. So maybe it's tough love. Maybe it has he's noticed something, like you said, purely in in the Delhi Capitals, the IPL team he plays for, they love him. You can see the love and respect. He's been retained now. They back him every time he plays, and but you can see that he's kind of dropped down the pecking order since 2018. I think even going into that World Cup, I thought he was looked at as the big star in that middle order. But I think Pooran has kind of upstaged him in some ways. But there are so many others who come into that Test lineup. I just don't think it was consistent enough in Test cricket. So, maybe it's happening at the right time. He's still a very young man. So whatever it is they've noticed, I'm sure he can overcome it. And purely based on talent, he's such an exciting cricketer. I hope we see a lot of him in West Indian colours for many years to come.
Brilliant enough. I need to ask you, Bharat, as a cricket writer, how difficult it is for you to sit down and do writings on cricket, especially Test matches. How difficult is that task for you as a writer? I mean, it's pretty much easy for the broadcaster, for the radio commentator, but as a writer, I mean, it takes quite a lot to put that whole perspective of a game and doing it almost every single day, including probably the previews. How much it takes and how difficult it is as a writer. And I mean, you have been doing it for a while. Share with me what's the thought pattern as a cricket writer?
I'm so glad you called it a difficult job, Michael. Very few people do. People always look at it as some glorified, glorified job where you just get to watch cricket for free and get to travel the world. Those are the perks that come along with it. But I mean, it's you really need to enjoy it, like any job, I guess. But you can look the way you want to, Michael, when you're not on TV. You can grow your hair out. You can have an unkempt beard. So those things, and even if you're doing radio, like I do quite often, your face is not on camera. You can dress up in whatever way you want to. And there's one reputation I have around the world of always looking like I'm going to the beach, which is not a bad reputation to have, regardless of whether I'm covering a Test match in Manchester or whether I'm actually in Barbados. So, so there are a lot of good things to this job, but it's difficult in the sense that, like I said, you're doing it day in, day out. And unlike a lot of other sport, you're pretty much covering those 5 or 6 countries, or 5 or 6 teams over and over and over again. So at times that freshness might not always be there, which might be there a lot more in other sport where you are covering, many, many more teams or many, many more countries, and there's more variety. But I've always found Test cricket more fun to cover than the shorter formats, because I love storytelling as a format, and Test cricket just gives you so much more time, right? You can build so much drama around a Test match, around a day's play, around one session, really, if you really observe well. And I love watching cricket, and I love observing cricket. There's a big difference. Like I really want to. I get involved with the cricket. I watch, like to watch 360 degrees of what's happening, and kind of it gives you context to the whys and the whats of not just the runs and the wickets, but also everything. Like, every tactic, every single movement that a batsman or a bowler or a fielder makes on the field. And I think it's like at times like a day's cricket in a Test match, especially. It's almost like one lifetime. There's so much that happens, that you if you really observe well, and you are blessed with the ability to put it into give it some structure. I think it's a very enjoyable task, and that's how you make do for that lack of freshness which I spoke about earlier. You might be writing about the same cricketers over and over again. I mean, especially when you cover teams like India and Australia, how many times can you write about how great Virat Kohli is, or how great Steve Smith is, or how quirky Manas Labuschagne is? But you still have to find different ways of doing it, which is, for me, is the biggest challenge. And I always talk about the press box, the written press anyway, during a Test match. I compare it to people serving a life sentence. To just quote from the Shawshank Redemption, like Morgan Freeman says, a man would do anything to keep himself occupied, because once you enter the press box, you're there for those 7 or 8 hours. Of course, unlike in a life sentence, you've offered a lot of free food and a lot of everything. The fridge is always stocked. In some places, you're even offered some free alcohol, especially in South Africa, depending on who the sponsor is. But you see different people doing different things. Some people are just on Twitter. Some people are watching something else on their laptop. But then there are people like me who are I'm the loudest and the most maybe obnoxious person in a press box. I'm always talking, but I'm also always observing. So that is the way I serve my life sentence in the press box, I guess, by being noisy, but also observing every minute detail. And it's not an easy task, especially when you're on tour for long periods. 2019, I was in England for 4 months. You're away from family, you're on the move every day, and to watch every net session, to write previews and all that. After a point, it can get to you, like in any other job. But Test cricket is so much easier. One day cricket is increasingly found more difficult than any other format. T20 is the best. It's the one format you can cover with a hangover, because you can sleep the hangover off and still go to work at 7 p.m. and you're fresh. And it's T20 cricket, because there's so much strategy and so much tactics that gets jammed into those 2 hours. It's fun to write. One day cricket suddenly is just it used to be fun when I started covering, but it's just become a challenge to be able to find a narrative, because there are so many one dayers which have no relevance at times. They're just a random 3-match series, and especially India, Australia, they play each other so many times. It's very difficult to build up that drama about one thing. Just overexposed almost. This is saturation level that you reach. So one day cricket is challenging, but Tests and T20, Tests in particular, I love writing on Test cricket.
So let's look at the future of cricket as we get ready to wrap up on this very interesting program. And do you think that cricket will get Olympic Games status in the near future? We know of it getting its way around the Commonwealth Games, but in terms of Olympic Games status, do you think cricket will get that?
Michael, I've always believed that, men's cricket has had the opportunity to grow the game and make it an actual global game. I mean, I know it's the second most watched sport in the world, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that India is one of the main cricketing countries, and there are 1.6 billion of us, officially. So I think it has a lot to do with the viewing numbers around the world. But uh, men's cricket has had this opportunity for 150 years almost, and I think it's kind of fallen short. And I believe that women's cricket, it will be the real pioneer in terms of actually making it a global sport. I mean, we saw that Thai women make such a great impact in the World Cup very recently last year. And women's cricket is growing all the time, especially here in Australia. I know it's been sort of, it hasn't really caught up to that level in countries like India and to an extent even in the West Indies, but in terms of exposure. But that's going to happen as well. And I think, it's already, we've seen women's cricket in the Asian Games. We saw it and it's coming back now. This Commonwealth Games where cricket's going to be played again, like women are going to play. So, men's cricket can stay where it is, but women's cricket, I think, will really surge ahead and like pave the path for, Olympic recognition. I'm sure it'll be in the Olympics maybe in the next 8 or 12 years. And it has to. I mean, if you really want to call yourself a global sport, you need to be part of the Olympics. I know historically it's been looked at as, but cricket is like, it can survive without getting that kind of world recognition. But I think that attitude has to change. And one of the most important things that will happen while taking it to the Olympics is, I think the Chinese market will get really interested. And I think cricket needs China in many ways. China and the USA, big countries, needs it. What I mean by that is it'll really grow the sport even more. And I think it's a sport that can entertain people around the world if marketed properly. And getting that Olympic tag will be very important. And I think the women are going to do it. Men have failed too long.
Not good news for men, though. But I really want to thank you for that conversation there, and just to let you know that while we were speaking, the GoFundMe had capped over $11,000, so it is actually growing. It's now 11,000 plus, and I think you're getting very close to the $20,000 goal, which is what you're hoping to achieve. And we hope probably within the next few days that it will really catch on. And I want to thank you for spreading the news on Patrick Patterson. Certainly, I think a lot of folks may have been asking about that. And in retrospect, it probably may open, the whole conversation about these legends, where are they? What are they doing? Yes, we have been seeing and hearing the likes of, Sir Viv Richards and, whether it's Courtney Ambrose and others, so Andy Roberts and others. But there are others who we have not heard or seen in quite a while. And definitely this might spark some interest, and, there will be some curiosity as well, and questions will be asked, and hopefully answers forthcoming. Bharat?
Absolutely. And I just say this, Michael, I just hope that in the future it doesn't take some random journalist somewhere, Indian journalist living in Australia, to do something like this. Like, we live in a world where sport is so professional. There are associations, there are bodies, players' bodies, and these guys and girls need to be taken care of. We see a lot of these cases, not just in cricket, other sport as well, where you suddenly hear about, and it's generally journalists like you and me who bring these stories to the forefront about what someone's suffering through. I've seen it everywhere. I think the responsibility, the onus should be on these bodies. Like, once you have had he or she represent you at that level, I think it's the onus is on you to take care of them. And hopefully it doesn't come down to, like I said, some fellow somewhere starting a fundraiser for an ex cricketer who brought joy to so many people around the world. And you're seeing that joy being reflected, and people paying back in paying back in style. Really, it's great to see what people I want to thank each and everyone for sharing and contributing. It's generally they say it's going for a good cause. I think, yeah, what better cause than to bring uh, joy and happiness to someone who did that for you, when you were growing up, maybe. So it's good, but it shouldn't come down to people like me. Honestly, there are bodies, richer bodies than out there, who should be some people have um, tweeted and even emailed me, Michael, saying, why aren't you going and asking the rich cricketers to come out and contribute? Why should it be common people who are doing it? I mean, common people are still doing it. And I don't think it's the cricketer's responsibility per se, unless they had some personal relationship with it. I think it's these bodies that without pointing fingers at the West Indies Cricket Board. Anyway, it happens everywhere. It's just one example. It happens in Australia. I've heard so many stories of non-cricketing sports people from other facets of the industry who are struggling, whose plight comes to the fore through pieces like the one I wrote on Patrick Patterson. So it should not be happening. It shouldn't come down to people like me.
Yeah, but at the same time, there might be those who saying that it's happening too often and too many, and something must be done. Yes, there will be those who may fall through the crack for other reasons, but there should be a system in place to ensure or to minimize, to mitigate these sort of occurrences. Too many, and to the detriment of the sport, because you will tend to fail to attract young cricketers who will probably juggle between, especially here in the West Indies, where there's the basketball, for example, with the NBA, lucrative NBA, for example. Then there's the football, and so close to scholarships in U.S. colleges for various sports and things. We find out that some of them even go into baseball, as once cricketer, going into baseball for pitching and fielding, things like that.
Yeah.
So cricket has to be very, very careful. Cricket in the West Indies in particular has to be very careful.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's something that we've heard happening over such a long period of time. I mean, from the 90s onwards, since cable TV and American television became a big deal in the West Indies. So yeah, I mean, it's a lesson, like we discussed earlier, for everyone. And sport is filled with so many positive stories, but there are also stories of people, men and women, who played at the highest level, and for whatever reason, fall on hard times, or slip through the crack, like you said. But they need to be offered a helping hand. Everybody, I strongly believe, Michael, everybody deserves a second chance in life, at whatever stage of their lives they are in, cricketer or not cricketer, whatever you do in life. So no one should be left behind.
Okay, then. Well, thank you very much. I think I'm getting the cue from the back that the pet is ready for breakfast. I know it's Sunday. It's Sunday in Australia where you are, and I think the pet is giving me the cue that it's time. It's time up. And I want to thank you, Bharat, for being with me this Sunday in Australia, Saturday in over here in New York and the Caribbean in particular. Thank you for the conversation, and I hope we can chat sometime again. And looking forward to more support for Patrick Patterson. Thank you for that initiative, and I'm hoping that even here in the the United States and the Caribbean, that there could be some support for Patrick Patterson. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. Yeah, I know she started walking around, which means that if I don't take her to bed now, it'll be a sleepless night for me. So, thank you so much. And it's winter time, so I don't want to be outside either. So, thank you so much, and thank you again for everyone for supporting and contributing. And I mean, it's hopefully things look up for Mr. Patterson, and he finds that confidence to live life like we do, really from the periphery of the world. Like I said, he comes into and shares the world that we live in. And it's been a pleasure, Michael. It's like you notice, I have gone on a bit, so my apologies for that, but thank you so much for having me on.
No, I appreciate you sharing, because obviously it was on short notice, and also that you were able to give I would say quite an insight into that of Patrick Patterson, your meeting with Patrick Patterson. And I think it's more overwhelming now that people could understand the plight he's going through, and hopefully that something could be done. And I want to thank you for sharing that story with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, then. So there you had it, folks. From Adelaide in Australia, Bharat Sundaresan. He's a writer with Cricbuzz, and he once wrote for the Indian Express. He was in India, lived in India, from India, and now resides in Australia. And he's the one who actually did that piece on Patrick Patterson some 4 years ago, and found it important that he starts a GoFundMe campaign to assist. It says, help Patrick Patterson get on his feet again. And we have been running the link on the monitor, and you can always Google that. But it's important that you make a contribution, whatever it is, whatever little it is, to Patrick Patterson. As explained by Bharat, Patrick called him and really expressed some desperation, I will say, and he thought it best to start a GoFundMe. It's his first time, as everyone will have a first time doing that, and it was his approach to assist Patrick Patterson, and it's only a goal of $20,000. He's somewhere close to that. I say close, but let's say it's past the halfway mark, just past the halfway mark. And we're hoping that that will spread awareness to not just cricket fans, but also the Jamaica Cricket Association, Cricket West Indies Players Association, others, that there must be some place to assist these former cricketers. And we do not know the extent to which Patrick Patterson has been approached in terms of his native Jamaica, but he is in a situation now where he needs the assistance. And I want to thank Bharat for that initiative. All the way, I say all the way, it took someone all the way in Australia to see the importance and really make an effort to assist Patrick Patterson. Patrick has been one of the fearful among the pacers, and it's 20 plus years, but still he made that contribution to West Indies cricket. And as I showed earlier, he was among the top bowlers. You're seeing so Cutley Ambrose and others in that photo with Patrick Patterson. Yes, he made his contribution to West Indies cricket. Folks might recall this photo of Patrick Patterson. Folks might recall this. What they may not recall is this photo. That's him at least 4 years ago at the age of 55. And this is him and Bharat. And that Bharat says that photo was taken just before leaving Kingston. Just before leaving Kingston, he took that photo outside of his home. And we're hoping that, folks can see the merit in this initiative and provide some assistance to Mr. Patrick Patterson, PP, as we call it. I want to thank you folks for being part of our program this weekend. Invitation is yours to join us on Thursday for another TalkSports program, 8 o'clock in the evening. This time we'll be talking cricket, and we'll be going to Grenada. The Grenada Cricket Association will be speaking to the president, Mr. Dwayne Gill. We will be talking about a new initiative taking place in cricket in Grenada. And we look forward to that program come up on Thursday between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the evening. Once again, I want to thank you and do enjoy your weekend. I can tell you, it will be blistering here in New York. We close to the 90s, not as in Adelaide in Australia, where I think it's probably, freezing temperature where Bharat is. But thank you very much, folks, for being part of our program, and the invitation is yours to join us on Thursday from 8 o'clock in the evening for another in our Talk Sports program. I'm Michael Bascom. Good afternoon.